Frank Stilwell, the most feared outlaw of the Wild West. The Wild West was populated by a myriad of outlaws, lawmen, and gunslingers, yet few individuals instilled as much fear in the hearts of law-abiding citizens as Frank Stilwell. Renowned for his lawless behavior, brutality, and cunning, Stilwell gained notoriety for his criminal exploits and his remarkable ability to elude capture. In stark contrast to his elder brother, who committed himself to the enforcement of the law, Frank opted for a more sinister path, securing his place in the history of the Wild West as one of its most notorious outlaws. Who was Frank Stilwell? Born Frank Bowles in 1856 in Iowa, to William Henry Stilwell and Charlotte B. Sarah Winfrey, his formative years unfolded in the Kansas Territory, where his family relocated in pursuit of improved prospects. The American frontier was fraught with danger and uncertainty, characterized by ongoing conflicts among settlers, Native American tribes, and competing factions. Growing up in such a tumultuous environment likely contributed significantly to the development of Stilwell's ruthless persona. A pivotal moment in his life occurred in 1863 when his parents divorced, an event that was both rare and often viewed as scandalous in 19th century America. At the tender age of 7, Frank found himself in the custody of his father, William, along with his brothers, Jack and Millard, while his mother remarried and had 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Mary. This family division left profound emotional wounds on young Frank, and many speculate that it influenced his eventual descent into lawlessness. Frank Stilwell's upbringing was marked by the stern influence of his father, a seasoned veteran of the Civil War, who may not have offered the emotional support and direction that Frank required. Lacking maternal guidance and with a father absorbed in the rigors of military life and the challenges of frontier existence, Frank was compelled to navigate a harsh world where only the resilient and merciless thrived. He hailed from a lineage steeped in military and law enforcement traditions. William Stilwell, Frank's father, fought for the Union during the Civil War and participated in General William T. Sherman's notorious March to the Sea, a devastating campaign that ravaged the southern landscape. In contrast, Frank's elder brother, Simpson Jack Stilwell, chose a markedly different vocation. Jack became a U.S. Marshal, scout, and Indian fighter, earning accolades for his bravery and integrity. While Jack adhered to the law, Frank consistently flouted it. This scenario epitomizes the archetypal story of 2 brothers, one a paragon of virtue, the other a figure of infamy. What circumstances drove Frank toward a life of crime? Was it a reaction against his father's rigid discipline, a fervent quest for self-definition, or was it merely the allure of a lawless existence? Regardless of the motivations, Frank Stilwell quickly established himself as one of the most notorious outlaws in the West. The first act of violence marked a turning point for Frank. In 1877, he and his brother Simpson arrived in Prescott, Arizona Territory in search of employment and new prospects. The frontier town was characterized by its rough and tumble atmosphere where lawmen and outlaws frequently shared the same streets. In this environment, conflicts were often resolved through gunfire rather than dialogue, and it was not long before Frank found himself embroiled in chaos. He obtained a position at Miller's Ranch, working alongside cowboys, ranch hands, and other wanderers striving to survive in the Wild West. Among his colleagues was a cook named Jesus Bega, a man known for his propensity for heated altercations. On October 18, 1877, the tensions between Frank and Bega escalated dramatically. The precise circumstances surrounding their confrontation remain ambiguous. Some narratives indicate a disagreement regarding food or working conditions, while others suggest a more personal animosity. Regardless of the underlying issue, verbal exchanges quickly escalated into threats, which ultimately culminated in violence. Frank, recognized for his volatile temperament, drew a firearm and discharged a single round into Bega's lung. The cook fell, gravely injured, and succumbed shortly thereafter. While homicides were not entirely rare in a place like Prescott, Frank's future hinged on his ability to persuade a jury that his actions were warranted. Despite the fatal outcome, he successfully evaded a murder conviction by asserting self-defense, a frequently employed and often effective defense in the tumultuous frontier courts. In the chaotic environment of the Arizona Territory, jurors typically exhibited sympathy towards individuals who resorted to lethal force in self-defense, particularly if the deceased was viewed as the aggressor. Frank was acquitted, but the incident established a precedent that would influence the remainder of his life. Having taken a life without facing legal repercussions, he had diminished reasons to fear the consequences of future violence. Following his acquittal, Frank ventured into various occupations, yet trouble seemed to persistently accompany him. He took on the role of a teamster for C.H. Hamill, transporting goods across the challenging landscapes of the Arizona desert. However, the monotonous nature of life on the road did not hold his interest for long. Before long, he turned his attention to the thriving mining sector in Mojave County, where fortunes could be gained or lost in an instant. It was within this mining environment that Frank once again found himself embroiled in a lethal conflict, this time with Colonel John Van Houten. On November 9, 1879, Frank became involved in a fierce dispute over a mining claim with Colonel John Van Houten, a fellow prospector. In the unregulated atmosphere of frontier mining camps, claims were hotly disputed, and violence frequently became the ultimate resolution to conflicts. As tensions rose, the situation escalated into a fierce altercation. On this occasion, Frank was not alone. His companion, James Cassidy, stood alongside him. The confrontation grew increasingly brutal, and eventually Frank and Cassidy managed to subdue Van Houten. Whether driven by uncontrollable rage or calculated intent, Frank resorted to using a rock to inflict severe injuries on Van Houten. The wounded man ultimately succumbed to his injuries, placing Frank in the position of being responsible for yet another death. Unlike his previous homicide, this incident did not lend itself to a straightforward claim of self-defense. Consequently, Frank and Cassidy faced murder charges, paving the way for a legal confrontation that would determine if Frank's fortune had finally come to an end. Frank Stilwell and his partner James Cassidy successfully evaded a grand jury indictment for the murder of Colonel Van Houten, primarily due to insufficient evidence. Whether it was the fear of witnesses to testify or the advantageous application of legal technicalities, Stilwell once again escaped accountability. His identity was as elusive as his ethical standards. In the 1880 census, he identified himself as a 24-year-old firefighter residing in Charleston, Arizona Territory, a seemingly respectable occupation for someone with his background. However, Stilwell was particularly adept at reinvention. He asserted that he hailed from Texas, although his true origins remained largely obscured. Throughout his life, he frequently altered his name and provided false information whenever it was advantageous. This pattern of deceit would prove beneficial in his criminal endeavors, enabling him to evade the law, at least temporarily. Yet, even a master of reinvention could not indefinitely escape his inherent nature. By 1881, Stilwell had abandoned any pretense of legality and fully adopted the lifestyle of an outlaw, culminating in the Sandy Bob stagecoach robbery. On September 8, 1881, the notorious reputation of the Wild West was vividly illustrated when masked bandits ambushed a stagecoach en route to Bisbee, Arizona. This particular stagecoach was part of the Sandy Bob line, a prominent route known for transporting passengers and valuable cargo across the frontier. As the horses slowed and the driver brought the vehicle to a stop, the masked assailants demanded money and valuables. The passengers, aware that any act of defiance could result in fatal consequences, surrendered their belongings without hesitation. The robbers also seized a strongbox containing $2,500, a substantial amount for that era. However, in their overconfidence, the outlaws made a critical error. During the heist, one of them referred to the money as sugar. The driver, keenly observant, noted this peculiar term. Although it was an unusual choice of slang, it proved to be a valuable clue. Unbeknownst to the robbers, this minor slip would later play a pivotal role in identifying one of them, linking Frank Stilwell to the crime once more. A significant breakthrough in the investigation emerged from an unexpected source, a shoe print. Fred Dodge, an undercover agent for Wells Fargo, was probing the robbery when he discovered a distinctive footprint near the scene. The shoe bore a unique, custom-repaired high heel, a detail that indicated a specific owner. Recognizing that even the smallest pieces of evidence could unravel a case, Dodge pursued the lead to Bisbee. There, the Earps traced the footprint to a local cobbler who confirmed that the unique repair had been made for none other than Frank Stilwell. This revelation placed Stilwell squarely in the crosshairs of suspicion, tightening the noose around his involvement in the robbery. With this evidence in hand, law enforcement acted swiftly. Virgil and Wyatt Earp, along with Deputy Sheriff Billy Breckenridge, apprehended Stilwell in Bisbee. Another individual, Pete Spence, was also apprehended alongside him. Given Stilwell's history of violence and his previous evasion of justice, law enforcement was resolute in their efforts to keep him incarcerated. Judge Wells Spicer, recognized for his equitable yet often contentious decisions, established bail at an extraordinary $7,000, underscoring the seriousness of the allegations. At that time, this amount was substantial, intended to prevent Stilwell and Spence from vanishing into the desert. However, the prosecution encountered a significant challenge. Although suspicions were high, the tangible evidence was lacking. The two primary pieces of evidence, the shoe print and the mention of the word sugar during the robbery, were intriguing but not definitive. During the hearing, both Stilwell and Spence presented alibis, and in the absence of conclusive evidence linking them to the crime scene, the prosecution's case began to falter. Judge Spicer, who had previously dismissed high-profile cases, including one against Doc Holliday earlier that same year, determined that the evidence was inadequate. Consequently, the charges were dismissed, allowing Frank Stilwell to regain his freedom. The conflict between the Earps and the Cowboys intensified. The Cowboy gang, notorious for their involvement in robbery, cattle rustling, and violence, operated with a sense of impunity in the Arizona Territory. The Earp brothers, Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan, viewed themselves as the final bastion against lawlessness. Their unwavering pursuit of the Cowboys positioned them as adversaries of some of the most dangerous individuals in the region, including Frank Stilwell. On October 13, 1881, Virgil Earp initiated new federal charges against Stilwell and Pete Spence for obstructing a mail carrier, a crime that, if substantiated, could result in lengthy prison sentences. Both individuals were arrested and transported to Tucson's territorial prison. The Cowboys were not pleased with this development. On October 18th, Frank McClory, a well-known cowboy, cautioned Morgan Earp that any further interference would result in dire consequences for his life. Concurrently, newspapers, driven by a desire for sensationalism, disseminated erroneous reports claiming that Stilwell and Spence had been apprehended for a robbery near Contention City on October 8th, despite the fact that they were already in custody. These falsehoods incited public animosity, portraying the Earps as power-hungry enforcers targeting innocent individuals. Lacking substantial evidence, the charges against Stilwell and Spence were dismissed. The Cowboys interpreted this as a triumph, believing themselves to be untouchable by the law, yet their hubris would soon lead to a fatal confrontation. By late October 1881, tensions in Tombstone had escalated significantly. Feeling emboldened, the cowboys were met with the Earp's frustration over the ineffectiveness of the justice system, which fueled their resolve to end the cowboys' reign of terror. On October 26, 1881, the escalating conflict culminated in gunfire at the OK Corral. In a chaotic 30-second shootout, Virgil and Morgan Earp, alongside Doc Holliday, fatally shot Frank McClory, Tom McClory, and Billy Clanton. While Wyatt emerged uninjured, his brothers sustained injuries, prompting the cowboys to vow revenge. The assassination of Morgan Earp. The cowboys did not forget this incident. On March 18, 1882, Morgan Earp was shot in the back while playing billiards in Tombstone. The assailants fired through a back window, killing him instantly. The following day, Dr. H. M. Matthews initiated an investigation. A crucial witness, Marietta Duarte, the wife of Pete Spence, came forward, disclosing that her husband, along with Frank Stilwell, Indian Charlie, Frederick Bode, and another accomplice, had orchestrated and carried out the murder. She revealed that Spence had threatened her to remain silent, but she could no longer suppress the truth. Additional witnesses reported seeing Frank Stilwell fleeing the scene of the crime. Although his involvement was strongly suspected, the legal system once again failed to bring him to justice. This time, however, justice would not be served through the legal system, but rather by Wyatt Earp himself. Wyatt Earp perceived the legal framework as fundamentally flawed. The very courts that had previously exonerated Stilwell for his past offenses would likely do so once more. Confronted with the tragic loss of his brother and the persistent menace posed by the cowboys, Wyatt made a pivotal choice. He resolved to take justice into his own hands. With Virgil injured and in peril, Wyatt assembled a posse to ensure his safe passage. Yet, Wyatt harbored another intention: revenge. On March 20, 1882, Virgil Earp, still recuperating from a prior assassination attempt, was preparing to depart Arizona. Determined to safeguard him, Wyatt gathered a group that included Doc Holliday, Warren Earp, and Sherman McMaster. They boarded a train destined for California, fully aware that trouble awaited them in Tucson. As anticipated, upon their arrival in Tucson, Wyatt spotted Frank Stilwell and other cowboys lurking near the train tracks. It was evident why they were present. They intended to complete their mission and eliminate Virgil before he could leave town. Gunfire ensued. Witnesses later recounted seeing Wyatt and his companions pursuing Stilwell along the train tracks, gunshots echoing in the night. Realizing he was outmatched, Stilwell fled for his life. However, Wyatt Earp was not inclined to show mercy. With his revolver drawn, Wyatt cornered Stilwell and fired. The bullet struck true, and Stilwell's lifeless body was left sprawled near the tracks. His evasion of justice had come to an end. Following Stilwell's demise, Ike Clanton, another prominent cowboy, claimed that he and Stilwell had merely gone to Tucson to vindicate themselves. However, this assertion was met with skepticism. The true motive was revenge. They had intended to ambush Virgil Earp, but Wyatt had preempted their plan. Stilwell's death reverberated throughout Arizona, forcing the cowboys onto the defensive as they realized the Earps were no longer adhering to conventional rules. This marked the commencement of Wyatt's relentless quest for vengeance, a merciless initiative aimed at eradicating those accountable for Morgan's assassination, Stilwell's demise, and the ensuing chaos. The revelation of Stilwell's corpse conveyed an unmistakable message. Wyatt Earp was no longer willing to await justice. His group would pursue and eliminate any cowboy implicated in the assaults on his family. In the ensuing weeks, numerous cowboys, including Indian Charlie, would meet grim fates at the hands of Wyatt's associates. Tombstone, once a bustling mining community, transformed into a war zone. The authorities had lost their grip, and the only form of justice remaining was that of the frontier. Frank Stilwell, previously a notorious outlaw, was interred in Evergreen Cemetery. Unlike his previous narrow escapes from the law, there was no evading this outcome. His funeral was a subdued event, attended solely by those who still regarded him as a friend. To the rest of Arizona, he was merely another outlaw who had encountered the fate he had earned. Stilwell's final resting place was a modest grave in Evergreen Cemetery, an appropriate conclusion for a man who spent his life eluding justice. His name gradually faded into folklore, remembered not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale of the consequences faced by those who embraced a life of crime in the harsh realities of the West. If you found this exploration of the authentic history of the Wild West engaging, please remember to like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell for more intriguing narratives from America's history. Thank you for watching.